Hello.
Hey, hey. Greetings, Black&Poly community. We're going to give everyone a chance to kind of get things going and get settled in. We're going to have an open live discussion here with Dr. Z. She is a sexologist. She's been a community member for a number of years and a close personal friend of mine. And we're looking to hear a lot about... you got that? Looking to hear some great stuff from her today. She's worked all over the world with numerous people in regards to ethical non-monogamy and in the sex positive community and a number of other places as well.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited to be here virtually and with whoever tunes in. I'm a sexologist, so I've been studying sexuality, which includes relating, loving, gender, for a long time. I have my master's in education of sexuality and my PhD in human sexuality, and I am also committed to Black liberation. So I think this is really important conversation to have, and we are welcoming any questions that you have. I'm a clinical sexologist, so I am familiar with working through issues and challenges and overcoming anything that could come up when people interact with each other. And we're leaving it open, right?
Yeah, we sure are. And she's here to help us all here within the community. We'll be posting some links to where she works from, and anybody wants to reach out to her for help, she's here.
I do coaching, clinical, therapeutic services, educational services. So if you want to learn more about certain things, or just even working on decolonizing and having an accountability partner, right. And really looking at decolonizing our sexuality. That's
a big one.
Unlearning a lot of negative messages from colonial impositions, colonial ways of thinking that have been ingrained. Probably also just speaking English can be really problematic. It's a very sexist, binary, hierarchical language that kind of can inform the way we think, if we think in language, and then how we're communicating. So even that right there, I know I've been familiar with different spiritual traditions that have non-monogamy ways of loving each other, and there wasn't really the gender situation is way, it's understood in a very different way. And so just want to...
And we've been just pretty much having these conversations over the weekend. We've been hanging out and just exploring how we're going to approach these subjects with you guys. This won't be too long, but since B&P is a beginners organization and group, this is just about educating you guys on what the community looks like, what polyamory feels like, and how a lot of us culturally in this community respond to certain things as well. So I guess with that said, maybe we can just start, if there's no questions, and please interrupt with the questions if you choose. We'll start with decolonizing our sexuality. For us, the discussion, a lot of times for some people, especially in our culture, we view sexuality in a certain way. And the way we view it in many ways can be unhealthy based off of the way that we've been told what sexuality is all about. We had some instances, we were actually at Pride, and we had some instances with, I'm going to bring up, we were at San Francisco Pride. We had a guy there, a Black gentleman. He was nude, and and the way he was responded to in that space was one that just brought up a lot of questions. How we respond to, I say, the male figure actually. We talk about women all the time, but the way that he was responded to, and it had nothing to do with people that weren't black. These were black people,
mainly black women. At that, and it was just.
So maybe Dr. Z can go into that.
I like to talk about, body autonomy and erotic sovereignty and respecting when we interact with others. I think what's interesting is we have objectification that can happen, the erotic exotification, the hypersexualization of black male bodies and black people in general. And it's just interesting, to what extent do we perpetuate the systems that we don't agree with, or that we don't, that is not what our values are. And so, we have a question here I'd like to answer. It's so deep. The thing is, it's really deep. And I think what's important is, there's the golden rule where you do unto others as you would have them done unto you. And then there's the platinum rule, which is like, do unto others as they would have done unto you kind of thing. And so I think that, that a lot of people get selfish and project their own understanding. And so a lot of those interactions were upsetting to me because it didn't seem consensual. But I also had to critique, I'm not talking about, I don't want to be restricted to how consent has been defined by white feminism. I want to respect the self-determination in terms of how that may look like. But there was still something really off with a lot of those interactions in the way they weren't relating to him as a human. They were
just pulling on his penis without consent.
Yeah.
I mean, to the point of, nudity in San Francisco is not against the law.
Right.
But it's displaying, sexual acts would be something that would be a problem.
Right.
There were people
posing with him, like in
sexually
explicit poses,
mimicking fellatio.
Right, mimicking. Really,
jacking him off.
Yeah, all that in public. We're at the end, the party section of the parade ending, and they were doing all of this to him. So then we started thinking, if this was a woman, and people were coming up to her doing this, what would the response have been?
And then just the whole response that we have of in our culture of what we view as sexually free.
Right.
That's one thing too. We have these ideas of what sexual freedom is, and I even come across this a lot of times with people that when describing what polyamory is, I'm a freak, they'll say, different things like that, and I think that being sexually free doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a freak. You could like a lot of sex and it may not be a freaky thing at all. Sex is very normal. It's a function. It's something that we use to manifest, to connect. Complex human bonds need to form. They typically form through sexual acts for most people. We have that for healing. So a healthy sexual appetite or sex life is something that's needed in a lot of people's lives to function as a human being, as a species. It's nothing freaky or nasty about it in any way, shape, or form to me. But whenever we're engaging in something like that, it has to be seen or thought in our minds, a condition to believe that it's something that's dirty and freaky and nasty. And it's really nothing more than just, nothing different than what humans would normally do. And I think that's part of the colonization.
Yeah, I think it's deep and it's connected. I think there's not one way to define sexual freedom and erotic justice. I think what's important is respectful relationality. And I also like the don't yuck someone's yum. So like what may be really disgusting to certain people may be really arousing to others. And so I see we have a couple questions here. I'd like to, okay, we can, you want to do that one first?
Yeah, it says here, can you point me in the right direction for reading materials to learn and explore more about polyamory?
In my culture. Which culture are you
I'm new
coming
to
from?
all of this, and I want to learn what I can. Yeah, what culture?
Yeah, I know. You know, we got the classics.
We're gonna assume, since we can't really see that your culture is a person of color or a Black person.
I think there's good websites that you can check out immediately.
Black&Poly.org.
Yeah,
right. Is a good one. The Facebook group, we got a lot of information, a wealth of information in the files section.
Files, and how you find the files is go to the top of the website of the Facebook group page and click on info, and then go to files.
Yeah.
Then you'll open up to all of our resources, from books to
I think you can learn a lot by starting off with
in African cultures.
In African
cultures.
I'm going to bring up a book that might be a little bit hard to find that a lot of people haven't read. This book is called Black&Poly, Blackeros, and it speaks to something that a lot of us don't pay attention to, which is that the further back in history we go, they always say the darker it gets. We have a deep, rich history of healthy sexuality within this, our Black community. We always talk about things coming up from slavery, and it seems like that's the only known history that we have, but our history is much deeper, much richer than that. Part of it is also, we always think of our relationships being formed in two different ways. We think we think of monogamy, right? That's the one that our masters showed us from looking up to the big house while we were in the quarters. That was the only example we had of what a family looked like. And then the other one is polygamy. We think of just those two as being the only ones that, the only ways that we can relate. But when you look at our history, the way we came together, the way we formed our love and our families, and the way we engaged intimately with people, we had a variety of ways that we've done this throughout history that has allowed us to live on this face of this earth now. The way that they came together is what leads us all up to being here now. Almost to the point of, they did all of these different ways of relating to allow us to sit here and say, we don't like it. And that's great. I mean, they made that step just for us to sit here and say, hey, I don't like the way this person, the way, even our parents, where a lot of people that have engaged polyamorously, where parents say, I don't like what you're doing. Our ancestors had to engage in the way that they had so that we can actually have the luxury of choosing not to. That's something to think about. But the reality is, we're much more than polygamy and monogamy.
Oh, yeah. There's so many different ways of relating, and I think that coming out of scarcity models versus, abundance paradigms, you're going to see a shift. And so in looking at cultures that are community orientated and are looking out for the well-being of individuals as it relates to the group, you'll find different ways of relating. One source that I really love is called African Sexualities, and it highlights voices from the continent of Africa, and it doesn't rely on Western philosophy, ontology, or ways of being, or spiritual systems to view the continent and the peoples. And that's where I really got a lot of expanding my mind and remembering my roots in terms of the different options and choices that I can make for my well-being. And so creating peace within myself, happiness, can be a part of the well-being of my community too. So bringing, emanating peace and love and joy is a part of the importance of the relationship. And so thinking differently in terms of even what it means to be a human, what relationships are, what does a family mean? I mean, these kind of concepts have been hijacked from maybe indigenous ways of knowing. And so we have this language with a certain amount of definitions that have been controlled by people in power that inform the way we think about things. And there's so many different ways of being. And even if there was, the problem is you can't just say, oh, what's polyamory look like in 16,000 years before Christ or before the Common Era. We might not have the same language.
Right.
And that doesn't mean to say that it didn't exist. We can say, people relating in certain ways, it may not have been documented for us to just go and revive. But from a lot of, looking at even kings and, just different ways of relating, there are many instances. And this is why when people say, oh, polyamory is new, I'm like, no, it's not new at all. And especially in non-European countries, there's just multiple.
Right.
Yeah. And sometimes we don't, we always overlook the fact that we even judge our own culture in some ways, because we frown upon a lot of the things that we do in our culture that we've been doing for ages. We haven't really been a people that really have embraced monogamy as much as we choose to say we want to, or as much as we claim we do. You look at it's just like when they were talking about, when they do these, when we found recently, when they did the study with the CDC, was it the CDC? That found that Black men were the best fathers in the country of all, what they found out was that through that study, the reason why the Black dads weren't really being counted was because they were looking at this first step was the dads that were in marriages, not out of wedlock mothers. But we generally make kids and we don't get married, and we find that a place of shame. But it's
using marriage to substantiate our relationships. First of all, at some point we weren't allowed to get married, and we figured out ways to connect to each other regardless. And marriage has a history in property management, or
and ownership
and things. And I think that relationships can go beyond marriage. But what's happening is like how families are defined with the law, with the culture.
Right.
It makes our family. We have extended family systems naturally.
We've always had it.
And even how we, who's even in, what is a nuclear family? All these things. We have more of an expansive way of relating from jump, just even in terms of family, not obligations, but what is family. And you see this even in, Black queer communities, where even if we're the family thinks that, or been indoctrinated in thinking that homosexuality is a sin or whatever, the problem is that they would reject the family member. Those people were still able to create their own family, chosen family, and I think that they created space. They utilizing the resilience and embodied wisdom and just surviving in toxic environments. They were able to create their own spaces and hear things like you can't dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. What if some of those tools were Columbus? But also spending time to create new houses with our own tools.
That's
and they might, it doesn't even have to be a house, it could be something else. But I think Yeah, and there's more questions.
Okay, great. Let's look at it.
Well, we missed the first one.
We missed that one.
Which
Let me see.
was
Here was
a question about. That's not coming up on yours too. We have.
Can we?
Can you expand upon the concept of Osunality? I've seen you mention it before, but would like a better understanding of what you mean by this.
And Rhiann Davis also wants you to post the name of the book, so if you want to post it here.
Okay.
Sure.
We will.
We're tackling two things.
All right.
Okay.
I was reading African Sexualities, a Reader by Tamale. I think it came out in 2010. And there's the chapter on sex positivity is a chapter on Osunality, African eroticism, and sensualities. And it is it's Oshun's honey or Oshun sexuality, and Oshun is from the Yoruba land in modern day Nigeria, and spiritual systems that orishas are kind of like forces of nature, energy matrix. Some people translate them to be goddesses, gods, powerful entities that, and each one. So Osunality is focused on Oshun, which is an orisha associated with fresh water, love, joy. There's so much that Oshun represents. I have like a little Brazilian depiction of Oshun. She's usually in yellow, holding a mirror. She loves honey. So looking at different, and the Yoruba spiritual tradition was used, transmitted into the New World, the Americas. It's in Candomblé in Brazil. It's in Santeria. It's in Cuba and various different parts. And it looks a little different depending on what colonial rule was taking place at the time. And basically, Osunality affirms eroticism and pleasure, and that's a simplistic definition. And I think so. One of the concepts that's in there that I like to talk about is the devouring vagina. So this is not like the Western ways of understanding sex, where the penis is going to conquer the vagina. Even looking at the root of the word vagina and what that means, it's supposed to mean like sword holder or sheath. Like it just has all these, and even you look in the vernacular, there's violent connotations with sex. But in Osunality, it has a different viewpoint. It doesn't have European lenses to analyze what's happening. So for sex, for example, I have my wondrous vulva puppet. So during sex, it like if the penis is assigned, the vagina is assigned agency, and the penis is seen as more passive, and it surrounds, it envelopes, it's made to disappear. Pulling out is seen as an act of resistance. So it's a different way of even looking at what is sex, what is our bodies, thinking about who has power, what is power, and have it being defined differently. And it also includes self-determined, you get to decide what's beautiful, and it's probably informed by culture, and that there are some African cultures that will modify their bodies to amplify what they believe to be beautiful, whether that's molding your butt like this, or stretching out your penis like this, or pulling on your labia minora in some places to create a specific aesthetic that is deemed pleasurable. And so acknowledging that there are, pre-colonial conceptualizations of gender and sexuality that has been preserved in sexuality schools throughout Africa, where it may be in the forms of rites of passage ceremonies or secret societies that share knowledge around eroticism and pleasure, whether that's relating or how to be sensual, what the walk is, how to move your body, dancing, movement of the pelvis was a part of the education of sexuality. To be able to learn and know your body in very deep, meaningful ways. And even the scent, what aphrodisiacs to pick in the forest to spice it up a little bit, and infuse it into your cooking. They talk about pre-coital, coital, and post-coital. So not just thinking about techniques that could be used in the bedroom, but what are the things that are leading up to creating an ideal environment to foster good sex, and also being aware and mindful of aftercare. Right. What would you need? What do you need after the sex happened?
So the act itself just wasn't geared around just sex. It was geared around bonding, connecting, spirituality, and things that brought the community together.
I think, definitely.
Instead of tearing the community apart.
For the well-being and bringing peace to the community is important for how we're relating in the home, manifesting wellness within the relationships that you have and your family structure, and that being very important for the larger community. We want to have peaceful households so we can contribute to the harmony of the community and how we're relating to each other.
And this is something that we kind of have to rid ourselves of coming into this love style, right? We have been taught and conditioned to look at sexuality through this colonizer's lens, and that lens brings us a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, and a lot of ownership, and so these things bring about behaviors that tear our community apart. So, and that's why I say, in looking at our sexuality in this way, that it's not so freaky sometimes can just change how you view things. And the act itself is not something that's tearing the community apart. You hear somebody do something and you say, oh, ooh, that was bad. And then you also automatically think, what harm is being done by that, instead of looking at it as a beautiful experience and something that's bonding and something that's, healthy for the community and not just yourself, knowing the impact of what it is you're doing by expressing love in this way. And I say love because, a lot of times we don't think in those terms. We think of it in terms of just getting our rocks off, right? The sex act can be that, but it can also be much more. And I think a lot of times we throw away the most important part.
Yeah, I think that sex can mean different things for different people. Yeah. And we have to be careful when we've internalized limited messages in terms of what that should look like, what it should be like. I always ask, how did you learn about sexuality? If you learned it from watching pornography, you're probably going to have a different perspective of what sex and expectations of what sex should sound like, should smell like, should look like, and it may be different. And I think that I like self-determination. In other words, allowing my embodied wisdom and knowledge to define what that looks like for me, because the more I study sex, the more I realize how much it's almost not even related to sex. Right. In other words, when I say sexuality, they jump to the sex, or even polyamory. A lot of people are like sex. What about the relation? It's relationality. It's what I say. I do sexuality education. For me, is love education.
Yeah.
And then that brings it back to Osunality, because Osun is love, and it's a way of understanding love that's not based off of Western understanding. Because even what is love? Privileging couples overall and romantic relationships over all others. There's some people that are not into romance. And there's some people that aren't into sex, but they still deserve healthy, fulfilling relationships. And I think, that's why I go back to respectful relationality, and also knowing that what's respectful for me may not be what's respectful for you.
That's right.
And even love, what I need for love may not be what you need for love. And that was a big lesson that I had to learn, is I was projecting, or I was treating others how I wanted to be treated, as opposed to communicating, not making assumptions, tuning into the needs, and creating space for partners to open up and share what their desires are, share their fantasies, share what their needs are.
Love being an act of giving, right? Going in, always recognizing that love at the starting point should always be an act of giving.
And I think to piggyback on what Z said, that I think it's so, this information is so important to me, because I want, our community, the Black community in general, mainly, to get this, get that understanding that, even in our small circle of BNP, that we can't project ourselves onto other people's identities of how they feel love, or how love comes to and they give love. So
much broader,
we need just to embrace everyone and support what we can support in our own understanding, but not project everything onto, especially when new people come in the door. We just can't keep projecting what our belief systems are. We have to start listening, and also taking what she's saying about Osun and all of these things to help us get a better understanding of how we can be better to each other.
We've entered into this really great time. It's an opportunity for us to explore who we are and look at each other in some of the most loving and caring and romantic ways that we've never had since the Middle Passage. This is a beautiful time, and we need to really embrace it and learn from this, because this is what's going to keep us here on the face of this earth, learning how to engage in ways that are more giving and more understanding and more loving, and opening up the door to unleash a love that we've never experienced before.
There's so many, love is abundant. There's so many different ways of loving, so many different ways of relating, so many different things that we can find joy, pleasure, and eroticism in, that doesn't have to revolve around a human or the genitals. It can be really expansive, and I think this, taking responsibility for your feelings, and that, also just even what is sex, I hear, it's important for the giving, but it could also be important for receiving. And also, I think the key is to know yourself and the truth. So some people aren't into giving, right? And so just know that about yourself. So maybe you want to, and then this is where the compatibility is. There's so many different people that need different things.
That's right.
There could be someone that, that you can complement in ways that can assist in what freedom would look like for you, or authentic ways of relating that's good for you in whatever relational configuration that you create for yourself.
And freedom is important. You hit on a key word, freedom. We've been bound up for so long, and haven't had a chance to really express ourselves in this way. There's a lot of things that have held us back. And just expressing love in a way that makes your partner feel free, just starting there can be very important to just allowing us all to be free, and using love in a way that just is revolutionary. That's the whole point of even opening up this organization and having people just examine how we've been loving each other in the past. communication being one of those things we talked about. I even found, we had a discussion a little while back about microaggressions. And, you know, those small little things that you do in a relationship that can just cut a partner little by little to where they just bleed out the love that they could be giving you or you giving someone else, you know, cutting each other all the time. There's some behaviors in our community and in the Black community that's been woven into our culture. And a lot of it is due to media, you know, radio and TV and movies and all kinds of things, microaggressions. There's a lot of unspoken behaviors that we do in our culture. And it could be, you know, it could be the snapping of the finger or the smacking your lips or rolling your neck. Those type of things, sometimes they don't communicate in words what it is that you're intending to say. And sometimes just using our words in small instances can you know, really work towards having a better communication. And I'll give an example, like say you're standing in a line at a grocery store, or I'm standing in a line and I grab a little piece of candy or something off of the thing, and Avery looks at me and smacks her lips and rolls her eyes. I don't know what that means. I know it meant something, right? But I don't, you know, and it's natural for us to do stuff like this because we were taught in TV and in radio and in movies that this is how Black people engage with each other. But if you look at old movies, you'll see a lot of the movies, like in the 30s, we actually didn't do that. This is something new that we've adopted, and we think that it's cool or we think it's funny. But really what we're doing is we're not communicating because it's almost like we fear being vulnerable. And vulnerability is what you need to experience love. But we don't do this. Like, so her smacking her lips and rolling her eyes, she might have really been wanting to communicate, baby, I love you a lot. I just bought this dinner and I wanted to cook this really great dinner and it's going to help me. And I want you to, you know, want you to live, you know, I want you to be happy and have a great health and all of these things. And I'm really concerned about you and I care for you. And instead of using our words, she smacks her lips, she rolls her eyes. And then what I get from that communication is something totally different. What I get is that she wants to try to control what I'm buying. And she, you know, I'm just tired of her telling me what to do all the time, right? So I'm hearing that. So that little cut, it's the little things like this that bleed out the love in our relationships. And so having these spaces where we just, we focus on, even when that happens, if I do it or she does it, usually we have a thing where we'll say, you know, that happened. This is not a time to argue or anything like this. It's just, hey, what were you communicating? Can you use it in words? You know, can you say what you meant in words?
Yeah, I think communication is definitely key. We're always going to come to that. And I think that, you know, sometimes using words can be hard, and sometimes there's places where it's harder to articulate. And I think it's important to create space to have conversations and to be able to express, you know, the impact that you've had on someone's behavior or speech or things. It's all a form, and whether you have to be careful, you know, what is considered aggressive or not. I'm not sure. I don't think it's just one way. I think it's situational. I think that we may have a different understand, you know, what is anger, you know, like people are, there's something about, you know, how we may be expressing our emotions that can get misinterpreted. And I think that it's important to ask clarity questions, or if something bothered you, to kind of communicate that and then create, you know, space to have conversation around conflict. Or I think getting really clear on what your pet peeves are, communicating those. If something bothers you, communicate it in a way that, you know, are they open? First of all, are you open to feedback? Maybe they didn't want, you know, maybe you're in your feelings. So, you know, sometimes there has to be a time, you know, maybe you don't feel like processing all the time. Maybe you just want to eat and you're hungry. You know, you don't, there's so many things. And I think also that we've been conditioned to communicate differently.
Yeah.
We can, people socialize as women, socialize as men. Men tend to have more direct communication skills, whereas women may tend to talk around the bush, or like try to send out these signals that completely go over their partner's head sometimes.
Or nonverbal communication.
Yeah. And we have
there's different ways to communicate.
We have some communication tools in the files. If you guys, one of them is a list of words, and it's great. If you check the files, you'll see this. We have this list of words that can communicate what you're feeling at that particular moment. If you don't have the words, it's a good little file to use to say I'm feeling this. It's just a list of words that I think it's called List of Feelings.
Oh, there's so many words.
Yeah.
To use.
Yeah.
I mean, even in Poly, he's just creating these words. The thing is that culture moves faster than language. And so, sometimes language is just catching up. And I know that a lot of people have why is there a new word for this? Because there's a culture that has manifested a way of being, and there's no words already there to describe it. And I think communication is there's always going to be room for improvement. We get to a place where we're able to communicate with our eyes, able to communicate without words? That's going to take a special connection. Meanwhile, we got to work on being able to
use our words,
and that's a process. And it's a journey. There's not one destination. Like, I've got it. I know how to communicate.
Especially if you're not. Like you didn't come up from a family that gave you a safe space for your voice,
or that if you growing up Jamaican, you gotta speak loud, you gotta get in where you fit in, when you gotta make room to join the conversation, and then when we're in, that's how we, and then you get into other spaces, and that comes across as violent, or that comes across as being disrespectful or inconsiderate, and there's a lot of blinders, really aggressive, or passive aggressive, or literally aggressive. And so that's, it's a thing like, our intentions, there's our intentions, and then there's the impact, and then those two things aren't the same, and I think there's so many misunderstandings, and we think, I have this experience, I know all that I know, you must be similar to me, I know, but actually we have our own innerverse, we have our own worlds that are existing simultaneously. That reminds me of the pluriverse, which is multiple worlds that exist simultaneously without hierarchy. It's out of the Zapataistas out of Mexico doing great decolonial work, and they're just like, I think it's helpful in my understanding of polyamory. For one, because there's so many different poly worlds, non-monogamy, ethical non-monogamy, relationship, anarchy, triads, pods, it's endless.
So we can't just have one particular way.
There's multiple ways.
And I'm going to bring up for new people, because this is a new person's space, to gain a better understanding of what's going on, I strongly encourage you to go into the glossary. And that's a good starting point, even almost more important than the books. We do have a living language, and this is a culture. And a culture. This culture it has very little, it's like any other culture. Compersion is we have our own flag here. I mean, this is the.
Oh wait, where's our flag?
This is the polyamorous flag behind us. It's for new people. That's the actual polyamorous flag. That's one of them. There's a number of flags. That's one of them. This here is the Black polyamorous flag, and flags are a unifying thing.
We talk about the history of this a little bit and the creation of this. Obviously, we have the colors that are in our, I think, Pan-African colors out of Marcus Garvey created with in the 1920s.
And the heart is an Adinkran.
A Dinka symbol.
Type styled heart. It's very unique in its expressions of what polyamory is within the Black community and our culture, which we do have a deep, rich culture with all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds, and young and old. We have people that were practicing forms of polyamory before the whites came along and called it polyamory. This flag pays respect to those people that went before us as well.
And those to come after. Sankofa.
That's right. That's right.
And the infinity sign. So, polyamory has the heart and the infinity sign around usually our symbol, and to put the colors and meaning for our community. So, yay.
Yeah, that's our flag. So.
Lots of different flags for a lot of different communities. And they mean things, and even the flag to the right. This flag here. That flag is the asexual
little
flag.
Part of education here. That's the asexual flag. There are people that engage with their partners in an asexual way. For new members that don't understand what that means,
they're not. It's not all about sex. That's not the defining aspect of a relationship. That there are other so many diverse communities within the asexuality community teaching me so much. So shout out aces. There are asexuals in polyamory,
and they're on a spectrum, right?
Yes, I'm on the spectrum.
We all have different ways that we relate. We're on so with asexuality, these are people that engage that may not want to engage in sexual activities at all, and then there's some that engage in a demisexual way, which would be
demisexuality is having needing an emotional connection before any sexual activity to develop, and thinking about demisexuals is a part of asexual community.
The opposite of demisexual would be
megasexual. Megasexuals tend to they need a sexual connection before an emotional connection will be formed. Megasexuality, pro-ho, it's okay, like expressing yourself sexually is kind of how you're orientated.
Right, it's a handshake to some people. I'm reaching out to connect with somebody, to bond in a deeper way. I'm going to be more of a hypersexual person that needs that. And then you have the demisexual, which is on the other side, and then you have the people in the middle, which are.
Well, here it is. It depends on what moves you. I can give you a bunch of awesome new jargon terminology, and it is great when you think you're all alone when you're really not. And there's a lot of people that probably have very similar ways that they need to develop relationship, to connect with each other, different needs, different desires.
Right.
And so there are these emerging terms that can kind of describe the focus or the articulation of it.
It can help you communicate, right?
Knowing. I hope everything's
these words
doesn't
help.
Matter what your relational desires are, or how you are practicing, or what your philosophy is around relating. Communication is always going to be helpful for improving and hoping that, I'm so humble. I try to study communication skills. I've been working on it, but I always leave room for transformation and growth, and trying to be open to better ways of relating. And to highlight all the sexual orientations, there's no way,
it's a lot of them.
A lot of them end up being, very Western in that people get sexuality and gender confused, because a lot of these orientations are based on, they're very gender orientated, heterosexual, the opposite, or bisexual is supposed to be two, pansexual, Oh my gosh, if I start naming all of them, I made a list one time of genders, and I came up with 64 genders that I personally came into contact with. New York City recognizes officially 31 genders, but then I was running a genderqueer non-binary group, and then I found 100 more, so there's so much, and that's gender. And so, like, even you could say, well, I love femme-presenting people or femininity. I'm gynosexual or androsexual. So these doesn't matter what gender you are, but it kind of refers to a type of gendered person that is there. So there's definitely newer terms that can be used instead of like even sapiosexuality, really connecting with intellect. That has been trending for a little bit in the community. And I think what's important is that you understand that you can be a complex person.
Humans are complex creatures.
That there's room for multiplicity. Like I can be a ratchet and scholarly. Like you can be holy and sexual. Like those are not necessarily contradictory.
Right.
And you can encompass both of those things. And there's different aspects that can,
and the words denote that you are not alone. Right. We're all different, but we all are alike in a lot of ways.
I think of the people that really do like being alone, autosexuals. They just love themselves. They're really into themselves. Like shout out asexual community. Like autosexuals are just super into themselves. They're good. They don't even need any.
See how much decolonizing that you have to do in order to like get free. Like it's deep.
I think it is definitely a part of the process, and so I want to leave leave people with some tools that they can use in terms of what would a decolonizing your sexual. How do I begin, right?
Yeah.
And I think for me, I started getting information, not from different sources, not just one source, and developing my skills to think critically, question things, dig deeper, research for myself. And another tool is mindfulness and practicing mindfulness.
Right.
I encourage everyone to check it out. It is being used now that it's substantiated by Western research. It's kind of trending because it's evidence-based. Because if you do research on it, it helps so much. No matter you could be pain, you can be have these different illnesses, depression. It's just being used in sex therapy to treat sexual dysfunctions, all these things. And for me, I use it for neurodecolonization, for auto-decolonization, for decolonizing my mind, for decolonizing myself, to get really present in the moment and to remember to observe yourself without judgment, with some compassion, and bringing mindfulness into different things that you do, whether that's breathing. Can I tell you the power of the breath, and just like being aware of the power in your body that we've been conditioned to forget. There's so much power that we have. And even if you're in an S&M relationship or you're, each person has so much power. And
to utilize our powers to move forward, right? We're that's why I say we're in a great time in this day and age to be able to explore who we are sexually and in all these other ways, that without being oppressed for that or being beat or killed.
Some people still are,
Some people are,
and we have to take safety into consideration, because the fact is it's not safe enough. It's not even legal to be poly yet. I mean, like we don't have any rights. So there's starting to be a few things, but there are clauses that do not protect us. And so I think that it is important to think about safety, and this is why certain people can't be out, and because there's a lot, and there was a comment about discrimination, monosexism, I forget the exact word for discrimination against non-monogamous people, but it's deep. There's housing discrimination, employment discrimination, parental rights discrimination. You know, we don't necessarily have the societal support to live authentically and openly without risking negative consequences. And so I think that you have to decide, you know, pick your battles and know, you know, what's important for you. And what for me is important is that you have an awareness of truth within yourself. We have to learn how to stop lying to ourselves.
That's it.
We have to learn how to pick up when we do lie to ourselves. And I'm not saying like we're liars, but I'm saying that there can be thoughts that we think we give more value or weight or believe that may just be like something that we shouldn't necessarily give a lot of meaning or value to, because, you know, thoughts come up. And so being able to distinguish that. What were you going to say? Yeah, and so like being careful even in terms of judging, how we judge others, you know. I was like, mind your business. I mean, the amount of how people care about where penises go and which orifices went into, and now you're gonna like, really, you care so much about that? I mean, maybe some people do. This is also another conversation, like how many fucks do you give as it relates to certain things, and just bringing clarity, because some things people don't care about certain issues and some people do. There's so many issues to kind of focus on, and to me, yes, it's great, it's important that we have, if we're afforded a privilege, we have technology now, we have water, we have shelter, hopefully, but there are some people that still don't have clean drinking water, Flint. There are still people, situations at the border, children locked in cages, ripped from their parents. There's still slavery, unfortunately. I hate to admit it. And there's really big issues that are facing. And it's hard when, you know, when we're in circumstances where it's not safe for us to be free, and it's not... and we're still just in survival mode. Because in the survival mode, it's hard to manifest other abundant paradigms that you can... It's
hard to be vulnerable. It's hard. And, you know, acknowledging that our past was an environment that was very unsafe physically and emotionally and mentally. And...
But you get to be the expert of what you need and what, you know, it's going to be taking risk. Love is a risky business. Having sex can be very dangerous. And so understand that there's risks that you take when you engage with people, whether that's of your heart or your mind, your body, your spirit, your soul, whatever that is. And, you know, risk taking is it's an aspect of sexuality, actually, just taking risks. And I think that it's important to be aware of your, you know, because this is the thing, you know, some sexologists be like, oh, or, you know, there's a lot of pressure during Pride to come out. Just come out, it will get better. Oh, that's from your experience. And it may not be safe for you to come out, but and just because you're not out doesn't undermine your power, doesn't undermine what you're trying to do or who you are, even if no one knows. I think it's important that you know. And hopefully, you know, finding people where you can be authentic with, finding spaces where you can go, and building community if you don't have one. And if your family, you know, doesn't, you know, then you find the chosen family and build your pods and build our community and create something different, because what we have right now doesn't necessarily support. And we think about, you know, different structures, you know, it's helpful when you can be supported through issues. Everyone's gonna have issues. It's normal to have challenges in a relationship. There's people. It's not 2, 3, 4, however
there's moving parts.
And I'll say this too.
There's all these moving parts.
Yeah, I haven't really been out as far as going live and giving videos and just telling people what this love style is all about that's new. Don't expect to learn this thing in one day. Don't expect just because you thought you were polyamorous or you had these feelings that, oh, now this means next step is to go get a whole bunch of partners.
You're polyamorous, or your whatever identity you identify with is relating whether you have a partner or not.
Yeah.
It doesn't, polyamory, you don't become poly by adding somebody into your life or your relationship or your marriage or any of those other things.
Yeah, you just simply have the capacity to love more than one person.
And it's a deep self-work journey that is yours, that belongs to you, and it doesn't belong to your partner. So you have to just take that, well, you don't have to if you want to. If you want to do the work, take it within and start there and then build. That building up will bring you.
Yeah, and when you think about it, when you first came, to monogamy, you had radio and TV and media and society around you that had compulsory monogamy had to teach you what monogamy was. It took you, even if you were a fast kid, it took you at least 10 years, 11 years before you got a handle on what monogamy was. Before you started saying, well, before you started saying,
traditional monogamy.
Yeah,
most people are doing serial monogamy.
Yeah,
it's like
and so you had to learn all of that language, and you had to figure out how you were going to conduct yourself in that environment. So understanding that you can't learn polyamory in a week. It's you have to undo a lot of things. So it may take you, I say on the average, since I've been engaged.
You can't put a number on it. Everyone's different. Everyone know how you learn. Facilitate. Hopefully you're open. Understand it's not
take your time.
Destination. No. I've been studying this, like seriously studying full time for over 10 years. And I'm still learning all the time.
Every day.
I learn every single day. If you're not learning something new every month, I don't know what you're doing. Yeah. But there's a difference between behavior and identity. Sometimes they're aligned, sometimes they're not. Right. And philosophy versus actions. So I may have a very liberatory philosophy, and I believe non-hierarchical. Yet my behavior is indicating something else.
Right.
And also, it's like this is what happens in a racial. Like just because you're in a monogamous marriage or whatever doesn't mean you're not poly, or doesn't mean or if you've never experienced anything before, doesn't mean you can't claim an identity or not. There's a lot of politics around that, and I think when you get into real deep decolonizing work, it speaks to not having to rely on being affirmed. You're resigned from affirmation at some point in the process of decolonizing. It's interesting how much we seek approval from outside sources,
right?
It's that's real, that's valid, but also getting to the place where you are aware of your self-knowledge and who you are, and how you're going to be contributing to society or your community would be pursuing happiness, which would be a part of living your truth, and I think I would like to see, not a place where we have to come out, but rather a place where we can come into. This, being in the closet kind of construct is what, how white people have had to articulate navigating in a toxic environment. It's a toxic environment where we actually can't just be authentically ourselves, and we can't relate in a loving way that's not harming other people. And so I do think that it's really important to start shifting our paradigms, doing the work that self-improvement, to be able to create more spaces where we don't have to come out. We're just coming into a space that's safe for us without fear of dying or losing our stability with incomes.
We're losing your children.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the actions towards that is also hopefully coming to a place ultimately where we reframe things. And I say reframe, like even reframe monogamy, right? You know, I'd like to see a day where monogamy is something that's very personal. It's something that you may choose to do because you choose to be, or maybe you just feel like you're more geared towards one partner. Does that mean that it requires that your other partners be that way? No, I'm a vegan. Not me now, but I'm saying it's like being a vegan, right? I only want one partner. That's the one partner I have. That partner may be with somebody else, but just because I want one partner doesn't mean that I have to stop other people around me from having one partner. I just identify as monogamous. To me, that would be great. I think a lot of the fighting would stop, I think, in our community too, because there's a lot of people that just simply aren't monogamous. And they try to stuff themselves into this box or try to behave a certain way to get acceptance, not knowing that there are other ways that you can do things that are ethical and are responsible. And learning how to just look at things from a different perspective can really empower you.
Multiple ways of knowing is so beautiful, and having a choice to be able to reframe your cognitive distortions that could be coming up, and also understanding that there's everything we know, and then there's everything that we know that we don't know, and then there's so much about what we don't know that we don't know.
Right.
And so it's great that we start expanding on, at least now I know I don't know it. I like when there's more, and confusion is also a form of awareness. It's okay to be confused about what the hell is this poly stuff. It's okay. That's a part of the journey of learning and unlearning. And also just like conflict resolution, like that's a thing. And we have different conflict resolution styles, and kind of just navigating and continuing. It's like work in progress in terms of, you know, meeting people where they're at and like communicating, because, you know, you're going to have different thoughts and opinions about things, and to be able to articulate things in a way that can be respectful and move through some things. You talk about vegan, I just want to shout out, vegan sexuals, that's a new one that I just learned, but there are some people that really, they only want to be with other vegans, that's a part of their sexuality, that their lover needs to be vegan, just kind of, and I think it's about how you understand being human, because if you believe, you know, you are what you eat, and, you know, you want to be eating whatever, and you want to taste that in all different ways, and you want your person to be, you know, so.
I didn't even know that was a thing, and I used to do that. Like, when coming into being a vegan, I was like, I had a checklist before I transitioned into polyamory. I was coming from the church. I was Seventh-day Adventist. I had all this stuff, and veganism was like right there at the top. It was like, if he's not vegan,
yeah, I mean,
I let it go.
You know, we operate at the level of awareness and consciousness that we are in the moment, and hopefully we will be exposed to expanding our ways of knowing and our ways of understanding, so that we can improve. And so it's okay to have whatever preferences that you have, but can you think critically about what those might be informed by? What messages have you internalized that you're thinking about people in a way that you shut yourself off? Or if you're judging in a very harsh way, that you're not open to experiencing what type of relating it could be. And that doesn't have to be sexual, you know, and it doesn't have to be intimate. You know, I think about, you know, even just how we privilege romantic relationships over all others, and all of the types of normativity that comes along with forming communities. And I think it's really important not to essentialize. And, you know, it's great if you figured out what works for you, but it may not work for other people. I can share what worked for me, and you know, you can go ahead and try it, but it's kind of like healing. You know, there's not like one size fits all, or mourning. That there's different people heal differently and take different times to heal and learn and grow and grow through movements, and, you know, transitioning out of relationships. There's so many like binary, hierarchical, mono, ways of thinking that, you know.
We talked about transitioning out, right? Earlier today.
Can you go into how our discussion earlier about transitioning?
About
that would
transitioning
be a great
out of relationships.
topic.
Well, yeah.
Just touch it a little.
Well, even so, when does a relationship begin? When does it end? What is relating? So when you have it being defined like, oh, I can't relate to you in this way, it's going to have to transform. My relationship with you has to transform into something that still manifests well-being for us. So sometimes we get to a place where, you know, that interacting sexually is no longer the best way of relating. And so because of how society says, okay, if you're in a partnership and it's romantic, then it should be sexual, like all that stuff. And then if ending breakups, I think of breakups as more so transitioning. So they're transforming into something else.
Again, that's a polyamorous term, right? That we use in this community, transitioning.
It's almost like death in it as well. Right. That actually, you know, when we think Western ways of knowing about death, it's like an ending, right? But when we talk about African ways of knowing death, we speak of transitioning into another kind of
beingness,
whatever it is after that. And so I think that, you know, looking at what we think of beginning and actually doing some preventative work. When you get really good at communicating and transparency and relating in ethical ways, I think it's important to have conversations being clear what are deal breakers, what is cheating, because these two things are different and they may be different in different when you relate to different people. Trying not to make these assumptions, because with monogamy comes a lot of assumptions, like, oh, micro cheating, oh my goodness, I don't even know, like that's the whole thing. But you know, it's good when you have, and sometimes you may not know in advance what may be your deal breaker, right. But I think that's important to navigate and communicate and talk about your pet peeves, what you're not going to tolerate, being clear on the table about that, and then also what would you need, like an aftercare, like what, or like, you know, thinking about, you know, are there more appropriate ways to do the breakup? Because, you know, some people don't want that text message or that email. Some people want a face-to-face. You know, how will you bring closure to, in a lot of people, they may not get closure, or, you know, there's so many different things that come up, but understanding that there's not one size fits all, and that there are better ways, there's different ways to be able to transition your relationship. And divorce, you know, like there are cordial ways of divorcing, there are cordial ways of, you know, continuing to relate respectfully despite the label that is put on or the expectations that you have for the relationship, expectations being the leading cause of heartbreak. Thank you, Shakespeare, whoever just said the quote. And like, so I think that being respectful of your healing process, and what we're also talking about is there's not a lot of roadmaps. You know, when you're pioneering, there's you know, we have to clear the path. You know, we have to create what's good for us, and so like, you know, there's a lot of advice that people give that are really rooted in couple-centric or monogamy kind of rules that are you know, like, because you can be mourning and, you know, mourning the death of a type of relationship or that way of relating to someone, and also creating new, be an NRE, being a new relationship energy,
all at the same time.
And it can be complicated to navigate, but what's important is not to like bring stuff from one relationship and project it onto another. That's where we have to start building our skills to be able to identify where our feelings are coming from, asking for how we support. And I tend to get nonverbal when I'm really upset. So I have to communicate when I'm in a different emotional state and kind of do the warning. So I'm like, you know, when I'm really upset, I'm going to get shut down. But you know what I really need is a hug. So if you start seeing me, because sometimes when people, they go through the motions like, what can I do to, you know, help, or like, how can I support you? I'm like, in that moment, like, I don't even know. I don't know how to communicate. But like, stay hydrated, so a glass of water is always helpful for me, like, and I just know that, so I have to like communicate with my partners things that I need to, or sleep is so healing.
Yeah.
It's ancestral medicine, anti-capitalist. Shout out the napping ministries that have been, thinking about sleep as a form of reparations that we deserve to rest and sleep, and the natural healing capabilities of our body will naturally start to heal ourselves in sleep, and all the other ways, whether that's dance or music can be super healing. Looking at what heals you, and I think it's important to
not experience holding a space where you don't experience the shame associated that's been so much associated with the things that heal us. It's very important. Like you mentioned, the sleep ministry, right? It's important that we don't feel shamed for healing ourselves. We're not allowed to do these things in our culture, in our community, because of the shame associated with a lot of
shame. It's a whole thing. I think I think you're on just we heal different or not, and there's no one way to heal. I find liberation and healing in twerking. And that's supposed to be shameful, and people are gonna project onto my body and what that means, and no, I self-determine what this means for me, and I'm twerking in a safe space. I go to the twerk church in Oakland, and we're very intentional with manifesting what our intentions are, and it's deliberately around healing Black femmes and allowing us to express ourselves. We can hold trauma in our bodies in different places, and we haven't been allowed to move our bodies freely, and we get shamed for a lot of our behaviors. And I'm at the point where you can try to shame me, but I think there's something about internalizing it. A lot of messages, it's easy to internalize. This is where the unlearning has to happen. And there's no shame in liberation.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that, when I became really focused on decolonizing myself and emancipating myself, and getting to a place of liberation. In the moments of liberation, there was no shame. There wasn't.
Never is. Yeah.
And I think, it's helpful coming out of paradigms that don't have sin. What if sin didn't exist? What if what they're telling me I should be shamed about is not right? They're gonna shame survivors of atrocities. I don't want to be triggered. We didn't put trigger warnings on this, but
right.
The rapists aren't getting shamed.
Right.
It's what you were wearing, what you're and that is not. We have to I had to separate myself. I did not internalize those things. I'm you're projecting all that onto me, and all this to say, it's a process. And the unlearning piece is really important because, if you grew up in the church, you may feel shame when blah, blah, blah. So I do this example, Catholics who, if they were taught that it's supposed to be for procreation, you're not supposed to wear condoms, all this stuff, that when they experience orgasm, the refractory period, the good feelings, endorphins, and things that the biological response, it actually decreases, because the mind starts the shame and the guilt starts to come in, and they're not able to enjoy the lasting effects of the orgasm because all that stuff comes piling in, and then they get, they had a little high now that,
and then they're going to struggle with bonding and connecting, right? Because that's the most important time to really do that, right?
Resentment.
Yeah. So during those periods, your shame and your guilt, right? And
some people aren't even aware of it.
Right.
It just is happening to them. They don't it can manifest in other ways. Maybe you can't identify that feeling because of the shame and the guilt. I know that's happened to me. Speaking of myself, the shame and the guilt manifested in my own body that I couldn't feel the energy of sex. Like it,
yeah,
feel
and enjoyment. It's something that's dirty. Right?
And this is where I think mindfulness is going to come into play and be really helpful. So if, say, for example, you feel shame, that's a feeling, right? And so not to put judgment on that, like not feel shame that you feel shame or bad that you feel shame. Like then we can really start spiraling into a like a deep emotion, whether that's feeling pain or negative, positive, neutral, whatever it is, but to be able to observe with some compassion and then think about, things that may have been formed, where that comes up. Can you think critically as to why that may be problematic, that you even feel shame? Like, and I can't tell you, oh, you shouldn't feel shame like that, or, I can't, you can't really help how you feel, but I think you can more so control or impact how you respond to your feelings. And that there's a disconnect where your feelings don't have to inform your behavior. I mean, they certainly do, but when you're able to like identify that, and instead of reacting but acting in a powerful way and taking responsibility for your feelings, what you need, you may need a distraction, you may need to shift, you may need to, and it's and then it comes back to knowing yourself. It's important to have an awareness, and we're trained not to even know our bodies, not to be able to listen to our bodies. What do our bodies tell us? When I think of pain now, I think is pain is my teacher. What is it trying to teach me? There's something that my body is telling me. Maybe I need more water, more sleep, and it's inconvenient because I need to be working and I need to produce for surviving in capitalism. But also I need to take care of myself and uplift my community, and I'm for Black liberation. And
surviving in capitalism is a whole nother thing.
And it's all, what's funny is it's all tied together. We need to go
on to that one.
Yeah,
I'm an
abolitionist. Talked about that. Yeah, but it's...
And it's hard, it's like, I really am for Black liberation, and, I understand that there are so many of us in the community that represent so many diverse, think about even like, what is it, whatever, okay. That too. I'm just thinking, I was just trying to articulate how diverse we are, and even in the poly community, we are so diverse, and so, I think, I just respect and love the diversity. I think we can learn a lot from each other's, and particularly the communities that we're least familiar with can teach us so much. I think I'm learning the most about sexuality through asexuals. Like, can you believe it? There's so much that I'm learning about myself through other. I think monos can learn a lot from poly. I think like gay community, like whatever communities, there's so much, even within the trans community, the non-binary, we're so diverse. And I think we have to be careful not to do the, divide and conquer thing, like separate it. Oh, your poly's bad, my poly's better. You're the, and like continue to separate. Division. There's unity, there's Black liberation, and I'm going to try to keep pushing forward. I want to liberate others, but I was like, I need to liberate myself, working on the self before others. And also understanding that oppression is interconnected. So I speak about sexual justice, but to me that's a part of relationship justice, reproductive justice, gender justice, all these things, disability justice, and like Black trans women dying is an issue for our community, whether we're relating or not. And people dying, Sudan is an issue for my community. There are really big issues. We have to pick water, environmental, people think it's not related, but for liberation, these things do come into place. How are we going to get liberated when we 6 feet under the sea? Like, like I'm focusing on this, but it's important that we all have different things to contribute to society. We all have our inner genius, this is my personal philosophy informed by African ways of knowing, but it's like we have purpose. And you may not know it, but I think it's important to know who you are, why are you here, what are you going to do to contribute to community or for the revolution, what do you have to do for yourself to get free, what does freedom look like? There's really important questions that we hopefully now there's more time to be able to contemplate and imagine and conjure and create for our community. And I appreciate, people working on doing the work to liberate themselves and really being careful not to project onto other people. Like, and this is the thing, like when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. There's certain conversations I'm not going to engage and give my emotional labor for free for people who aren't simply never going to understand polyamory, because they don't even want it. They're not even open to hearing about what that is. And so, sorry.
Hold on a second. This is somebody that never calls me, actually. Right? But they are a call on the line.
Communication.
Right.
Sometimes it's not a good time to talk about it. We need to take a rain check. I see some comments.
Yeah, if you guys have anything that you want to add to the conversation, you can either type it in the comment section. Maybe I don't know if we can join, if you can join in the conversation if you want to go live with us. But yeah, we are probably going to re-wrap. What time is it?
We can wrap it up in a minute.
We're getting ready to wrap it up real quick.
For other questions, if there's any.
Open the floor to any other conversation or questions, or if you want to join the live, we can invite you in. Also, it was a lot. Okay. This was deep. Great information, and I want our community just to really get involved with self, like she said, like that self, liberate yourself. That's the journey I took.
You don't have to do it alone. Yeah. I'm here for hire. There are other, therapists, there's other coaches, there's other people doing really great work. We talk about, we need an underground railroad. What if it's an underground railroad? We have to, and being able to start to tune into our embodied wisdom. I end up talking about liberation, education, sovereignty, self-determination, unity, upliftment. Black liberation there's not just one way of doing this. There's multiple ways, and we all have our own role that we have to play for the revolution. And just getting clarity around that, or seeking support. There's support people. You're not alone in this journey, and there's all types of ways of loving, and people are into so many different things. Let me tell you, if you only knew what they're into, you can just imagine. And
what about forgiveness?
And
a place for bringing people back from something that they may have failed us in. Like we felt failed in something, and we booted them out or something.
There's a cancel culture that's happening. Yes. I think forgiveness. That's a provocative topic, forgiveness. And what I say, where I've come to at that right now, is the importance of self-forgiveness. What yourself do you need to forgive yourself for?
Also,
because that's something that
powerful.
You give, regardless of if they say sorry or not, and letting go and moving on and being able to not harbor negativity in a way that's going to affect your well-being. It's just changing our livelihood.
We're, in coming into this lifestyle too, is polyamory. We have to recognize. No, that's just the thing there. We have to recognize also we're changing the way we're reprogramming and re-engineering the way that we love each other going forward. And to love our partners is to accept sometime that they won't be perfect all the time. Right? And what we need to relearn also is how to hold space for that, knowing, even with transparency, that should be a two-way street, or or whatever your configuration is, right? Because we come from this crime and punishment environment that our colonizers, brought to us, with the shame and the beating the truth out of people, and we need to understand that the truth can't be shared in unsafe spaces. So we have to create safe spaces for our partners to be transparent. Safer spaces, right? So
help us with the word.
And I'm saying that, for those people that are always, you hear some people say, you know, I'm always being lied to. When you're in a place where you're looking at that situation where you're always being lied to, you have to ask yourself the question, do you create safer spaces for your partners to be transparent and open?
How can we make this a safer space? What do you need for this to be a safe space? Because my idea of a safe space may not be your idea of a safe space, and finding compromise to be able to foster truth and open communication and transparency. It takes bravery. Yeah. I don't even use safe space because where is it really safe for us? Right. Hopefully in the bedroom. Well, I don't know. There's always going to be something. And just continuing to build and really working on making things as safe as possible.
Right? Asking those questions though, like instead of saying, "Why did you lie to me?" Where did I go wrong in you not being able to communicate? What happened there? What happened? Just having the conversation before throwing the relationship in the trash can.
Some people, I've definitely been seeing that, and also like, just dump them, or, and this is why, it's like, this is why married people don't go to single people for advice, because what may work for one person may not work. And when there's things with commitment, and people have different levels of commitment, and people are willing to work through different issues. So what may be an issue in one relationship may not be an issue in another relationship. Yeah. And it could be a deal breaker, but it could have, your partner may not have any idea about, there's a lot of gray areas. It's not just so black and white. Right. You have to figure out what's best for you, what you're willing to go through, what is healthy, and really start moving in a direction that can foster more wellness, more health. Yeah. How can you support your partners in living their best life? I mean, that's my thing. It's like, how can we live our best life? And that may look different for different people. And there's conflict resolution styles, there's different opinions on how you should handle things, but you are the expert of your own experience. Right. And sometimes when you're in it, it's really hard. You could have financial ties, you have children, there are reasons why it's very challenging. And even abusive relationships, it typically takes at least 7 attempts to leave an abusive relationship. That's it, it's helpful if you have people that can support your relating with different individuals. And then there's red flags that you simply are blind to when you're in love or in limerence, or and there's probably more things that you can tolerate if you are aroused, or if you are really in love. And so just like being aware of your blinders, learning from mistakes of the past, I don't know. Yeah, it's definitely tricky, but there are support systems, and I think that the support it's hard to ask for help sometimes, especially if we've been trained to be super women or independent, or like we gotta figure it. We've been left to figure it out ourselves, whatever messages. But understand that there are that it's important to build pods, whether that's related or not. They're using pods in transformative justice as well, and having accountability partners. I like to have diverse support systems. So I want to have that friend that can give it to me real tough love. I also want that friend that can coddle me sometimes. I need to have different people to support me in different ways, whether that's in my career, in my love life. And I also have to be respectful that they may not be in a place to be on call. That they're probably going through their own thing, and they may not have the emotional capacity to support me. So always checking in before you dump something onto someone else if they're ready for that conversation. But also continue to build different pods and different support systems for your relationships.
That's what's important to reach out for community. Information. Very good information. Yeah. So if we don't have any more questions, we can wrap it up here. We'll give I'm going to give up 30 seconds more for any other question, And if not, we'll just go ahead and wrap up this little session we have here.
And comment below on other topics that we can bring to BMP's live. So we'd like to do these every now and then. We don't want to overdo them, but they're healthy conversations that we can build from topics that are trending, that are weekly trending in BMP. We can have live discussions with other members if you want us to. Comment below if you're interested in that.
I see a comment by Joshua. Things would be a lot easier if people would be more accepting of poly lifestyle. Yes, but it still could be challenging relating to people because there's challenges that come up. And this is where I speak to the importance of building community. And this is also the danger and the safety issues that to be real, let's be real, that it's not accepted yet. There's no laws to protect us. There's major issues that are ingrained in our mentalities and the philosophies and societies and institutions. It gets really deep, and I think just finding some people that are on your team, who's on your team, and who can support you, so that you can
with the strength and the power and the voice to speak out against the abuse in these communities or towards people that are polyamorous as well, because they always say there's always a small percentage of people that are doing the abusing and a small percentage of the people experiencing it, and this much larger group that just stands by without bystanders. And those are the people that actually have the power to bring about change. So if you're somebody with that power, or that have a situation in your life where you can come out and you can speak, by all means do it. Because the more we do that,
if they're in a safe place.
If that's what I said, if they have the ability and the have the situation where they can speak out, then they should. It's important that we don't stand by and have things happen to us without speaking up.
Yeah, I really want to. Important for me. I love love in a way that liberates. I love love in a love that can expand and support growth and freedom. And I understand that people have different definitions of what love is and what sex is, and I respect people's way of relating. And that's and thinking, and except when your stuff is rooted in my oppression and it starts to affect and oppresses me, that's when I'm like, hold on. And I think that the plurality, the pluriverse, again, just going at that there's multiple ways of being and respecting sovereignty and different relating, careful not to make assumptions and judgments, mind your business. I don't know if that's a thing, but like being aware of what's important for you, getting clear on what you need, self-advocating for yourself, fostering healthier relationships that are in progress. I love partners that can assist me in my growth, and sometimes that's really uncomfortable. Decolonizing is very uncomfortable. It's painful. It comes with negative side effects as well. It's just not easy work to do when you live your truth in ways that people can't see you, that in ways that you become invisible, in ways that you're not protected. It's challenging. And so definitely there's always so much to learn. There's so much resources available, and there's things being created, and there's things that need to be created too. And this is like so much power in our community, and leading by example, and just like, manifesting the peace and the love in your relationships. And that can look different for different people. And
I like that.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Manifesting peace and love.
It is.
Okay, we have another comment that just came in. As a queer person, I understand reasons that many polyamorous people are closeted, but with the privilege that many of us have as middle-class, straight-passing, educated folks, it is our responsibility to come out and be visible, advocating for the more marginalized among us.
Exactly.
If you have the privilege to be able to do so, I would definitely take a stand. Sometimes we have to weigh I follow a code of ethics that I'm willing to sacrifice my job to speak out for Black liberation, but I lost a lot of jobs because I spoke for liberation of others, and to infiltrate systems and create change the best that we can. But I think it's also an issue of safety. It's definitely an issue of being brave too, and how, what is your capacity, and speaking out for injustice. And there's, sometimes this is where, you do what you can. And hopefully when there's teachable moments, you can stand up. But this is a thing with microaggressions.
Right.
And who is it responsible to teach? Because poly can't be teaching everybody about everything, and gays can't be teaching straight people about, how not to oppress them. We need allyships, more so being comrades. We need advocates, and we can't do all of the emotional labor ourselves. But there's so many ways of being, and it's very hard not to make generalizations, because I can find exceptions to a lot of things. Oh, we should all love each other, let's all liberate, let's all get free, but there's always exceptions to all the rules.
Yeah.
For me, I guess that's for agreements.
And we recognize, especially polyamory, it's a radical form of loving, and in some ways it's an act of civil disobedience, right? And whenever that occurs in society, there's always going to be a backlash. And we just have to learn how to push forward and remain in the fight as best as we can, and provide ourselves some type of cover for when things really go bad. Make sure we have a backup plan. It's
more support
system. Yeah, and a support system.
I think of normativities, and even when poly is getting more press, and how it interacts with capitalism and consumerism and all these things, and heteropatriarchy and cis-sexism and things, it's subject to getting whitewashed, and it's subject to being presented in a certain kind of way. Mm-hmm. And there's no one way to be poly, there's no one way of loving. But I have to be careful of polynormativity as well.
Right.
That is coming out, and just really continuing to make room for multiple ways of being, and respectful relating, and being careful about projecting, and it's don't yuck someone's yum kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It may not be for you, or that may not work out. There's so much growth, there's so much lessons that the pluriverse has for me, and lessons in pain, and lessons in relationships teach me so much about myself, about my needs, about my wants, about how I communicate, and traveling does for me too. There's different ways that open and expand awareness, and that's very helpful. I could say, I hope, I make all these hopes and wishes for our community to foster well-being and wellness, and I can think of peace, and I hope people live their best lives, and have this, try to throw out positivity, but there's people that may have radical perspectives to listen and have communications. There's generational differences, and there's differences that some people care about and some people don't. The ethics of monos and polys relating with each other, and sacrifices that make, just the issues of relating to each other, and continue. If you think about what is life, what if life is about relationships? And to create really fulfilling ways of relating with different people, and Yeah, I have a lot of hopes and liberations. I hope for liberation and emancipation, but there's a lot of work that has to be done. And I shout out for you being you. Shout out for you being invested in personal growth and
everybody here.
Shout out for you being here.
Yeah, everybody here,
where you've put your life into coming into a different situation that you weren't normally
and taking that chance,
taking that risk of coming into a space with polyamorous people to learn and grow with us. We've even expanded by creating the Delta Room for triad seekers and unicorn hunters. That's how inclusive we want to be, because there can't be just this one way of us doing polyamory. We have to be open to other people's perspectives. And that's why we created that, because they were coming in the door like this. So give them a space where they can communicate and understand one another's needs and wants and desires, just like you would want it. Do unto others as you would want done unto you yourself.
Do unto others as they would have them do unto them. Which
Wait,
requires
that
they would have done unto them, which requires some communication and not making assumptions about what that means.
Right. Yeah. Or having expectations.
Yeah. So I think what we'll do here now is we'll wrap this thing up.
Yeah.
But,
thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for loving in the radical ways that you guys do. There's going to be a link. Shout out to love, right?
Shout out to pride. Oh my gosh. If you have not seen our videos, check them out on my page. I have some pride videos on there. We had so much fun.
We did.
We hope next year will be even more amazing. I'm going to try and put something together so that we can have more abundance of love and energy at Pride 2020.
And we're going to give a link to a resource for reaching out to Dr. Z.
Yes.
And we thank her so much.
Please reach out to her. If you need counseling, if you need coaching, if you want to understand more about decolonizing yourself
and your love,
the one.
Right? You want to break that warranty off of the back of the TV, right? You want to hack your love in a way that just opens you up to all kinds of abundance.
Yes.
This is a woman to go to set yourself free.
Yes. I'm just a baby here. I'm so humbled. I'm a baby in this step.
Thank you guys for sitting in with us. Keep loving. Keep loving.
Peace,
pleasure, passion.
All right.
Happiness.